Hello, please create a new notes page that's on the right side called Economic Solutions During the Progressive Era with today's date. After completing the notes, pull out the need to knows. There should be one need to know for every uppercase letter, A, B, C, etc. So economic solutions during the progressive era. This presentation will go over those solutions to some of the economic problems like monopolies and the conditions facing a lot of workers at the time. So the first solution, Roman numeral 1, is called the Sherman Antitrust Act. President Teddy Roosevelt, who we see here in the cartoon, served as president from 1901 to 1909, and he was very critical of the rich and wealthy. So he often went after big businesses as well, even though he was born rich himself. He enforced the Sherman Antitrust Act, which we're going to see he enforced it. It was made before his presidency. So it was passed in 1890, but for about 10 years, nobody did much with it. It wasn't all that effective until Roosevelt became president. And he was looking to break up trusts primarily. And as you see, he's got his foot on a bad trust after hunting. Teddy Roosevelt was an avid outdoorsman and hunter. So this is spoofing or making something comical out of that. And a trust is a big business that combined for monopolistic purposes. For example, Rockefeller and Standard Oil combined with the railroad companies to get discounted shipping rates. That was a way of forming a trust. Well, when Roosevelt got into power, he had his attorney general file lawsuits against these bad trusts because he felt they were hurting the American public mainly through unfair pricing. So they were working just like monopolies, and that because they controlled the supply, they could control the price, and this hurt the public. Another solution was solutions to poor working conditions. So uppercase A is labor unions are the first solution to poor working conditions. An organized association of workers, often in a trade or profession, like let's say steelwork, formed to protect and further their rights and interests. So here's an image from the Homestead strike, and that's the violence that broke out as a result of the strike. And these are the steel workers that organized to form a union. And they were trying to further their interests, and a lot of times that was for fair pay, good working conditions, and fair hours. Now, they would strike, and that is a refusal to work organized by a body of employees, usually a union, as a form of protest, typically in an attempt to gain a concession or concessions from their employer. And again, always looking for fair pay, fair amount of hours worked, and good working conditions. So there's something called a strike breaker. And strike breakers are those that decide to work. So the strike happens, but then they decide they're going to continue to work. And this makes the strike ineffective. You can imagine strike breakers were not very popular. There's also something called a scab, and a scab is a person brought in to work that is not part of the union so the factory can keep going. Those scabs are not very popular with the union. Something called the picket line. And that's a boundary established by workers on a strike, and especially at the entrance to the workplace, that others are asked not to cross. So they literally form a barrier in front of the doors of the factory, asking people not to cross that picket line. That is symbolic as well as it's meant to enforce, don't go into the workplace. We are on strike. We're looking for fair pay, fair hours, better working conditions. Finally, violence, especially early on with the Homestead strike, often resulted from these strikes and is incited during a strike when employees of a business or replacement workers cross the picket line. In the case of the Homestead strike, scab steel workers crossed the picket line to work, and this made the strikers upset. And those scabs, remember, they weren't part of the union. And further violence occurs when local or national authorities, like police or the National Guard, are called in to restore order. The authorities often side with the big business. As was the case with the Homestead strike, the National Guard came and supported Carnegie. Okay, thank you for listening.